Okay, we're talking about responsibilities for the kids, take two. And the premise is that generally parents are slow to, whatever it is, delegate responsibilities and things like that. Um, I think proactive parents are more comfortable giving some leeway and granting more responsibility, as probably was always done years ago.
Yeah, I don't know about comfortable. I wouldn't go to your comfort level. I'd push yourself a little bit because that's part of being a parent is preparing your child for their own adulthood. And the sooner you start, really, now it'll be baby steps. That's the reason they're called baby steps. But um, push yourself.
Well, in the day, and it could be it depending on where you're located, it could be yesterday. I'm not saying 100 years ago, although things originated that way. But in an agricultural environment, having very youngsters out running a tractor, for instance, was very commonplace because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to drive a tractor. You had to have a kid that was trained to be responsible, but that started, as we have probably hit somewhere along in this series or these series, when they're little bitty, you teach them to be responsible, to do the right thing, and to obey. So if you give a kid basic instruction about how to do a chore, then you assume they will be doing that and not, out in the pasture cutting donuts on your tractor. Otherwise, they get a spanking. Okay, that's why they're not doing that anymore. They would have, but you nip that in the bud, right?
Right.
Hopefully.
I'll throw in here now. We've kind of, in these times, had this. I've heard the phrase that you're robbing them of their childhood. Guess what? You get to play until you die. You're not of those playing fun things. You're not depriving them of any of that. But if you think that giving them responsibility and helping them grow up is depriving them, you've got the wrong understanding, the wrong approach on this, because they will thrive with taking on responsibility, and they can have plenty of playing around too. So it's not either or. I'm saying throw in some of both.
Well, yeah, I think the point is super well made that if a youngster doesn't have any particular responsibility, then you have really sort of artificially created a childhood situation that should never have existed, because children should be starting out taking responsibility for their own stuff as early as they, for instance, take responsibility to either let you know that it's time for a potty break, or if they can go by themselves by whichever time, then that they're going to go potty on their own. So that is a responsibility that they have adopted from earliest childhood. Same way with letting you know if they're hungry or if they don't feel well or whatever. That's their deal. And you teach them to do so, and you teach them to do so responsibly, and then it just progresses all the way along. But there is really no such thing as a human being that should be so vegetated that they have no responsibility. So all we're saying is, okay, you take that to the other extreme of let them take as much responsibility at any given age as they possibly can. And we've been surprised, really. I still get surprised at what some kids can do.
Yeah. Really, what you're creating is not a situation of a child, but childish. And when you see people that are 14, 15, 18, 20 that don't know how to take responsibility and are childish, to me that was some kind of parental abuse that did not let them, did not push them, did not foster a situation where they got to do things, got to take responsibility. And when they get away from you, I'm concerned that they'll do it in a way that is like wild. Whereas before, if you'd given them responsibility and kind of pushed them, they wouldn't have any reason to want to go wild. They're like, life's already given me enough to handle. I'll just take the next step here.
Well, that defines maturity. So if you're going to have an immature child, immature for their age, that's going to be because they haven't been allowed to learn the wisdom to conduct themselves maturely for their particular age. The example of my dad who went to work for the county driving a dump truck on road building projects when he was 14. Now that is before the legal driving age, in case you were wondering. Of course, at that time, I don't know if it was or not. I don't even know if they had a driver's license in them days. Yeah, because he's born in 37, so 14 years after 37 would be 47, 51.
Yeah.
So in 1951, whether they had in Texas a driver's, I don't know, but the point I hope is made already. Right now, we wouldn't even consider. We'd say, oh no, you can't even let a 16-year-old drive a dump truck full of gravel. Oh boy, look at the death and destruction that could mete out. Woo! That's as bad as an AR-15. Woo! And it could be. I mean, it really could be. I mean, if he plowed through all the, the highway workers going about 40, 50 mile an hour, that would have been a weapon of mass destruction.
But what you're not telling here is that he had several steps of responsibility before he got to that, and at 14, that was a reasonable step because of all the ones that were given it. All responsibility was given him before that.
Yeah, I don't know any of those steps. I'm sure they were there. But
well, they would have had to have been for him to be able to do that responsibility, and the adults around him to allow him to do it.
Yeah, and, more generally to our way of thinking, that he was raised with a biblical worldview in terms of child training.